Welcome to the show where we break down the mental health stigma, navigate sobriety with humor, and prove that it's okay to laugh while you heal. Let's get real, let's get honest, and maybe a little weird. Growth is messy, but you don't have to do it alone. This is Sober Psychology. Folks, we did it. You are now at part 3, the final part, the final installment of the 3-part series of Higher Power. To recap what we've already been through, we've gone through the reality that, especially as addicts and alcoholics, that there is no other way of life for us to remain sober, to continue moving forward, other than a spiritual existence, a belief in a spiritual being, a belief in a power that's greater than ourselves, right? As a 12-stepper, as someone who's been through the big book, I know this to be true. I know that a lot of my issues and problems that turned me into this person who was making consistent bad mistakes, was a big catalyst for that was the fact that I was just apart from God the whole time. As a Christian, even before being or knowing that I was an addict or alcoholic, realizing that the parts of my life that become derailed are a direct result of me being separated from God. And that comes from my own stubbornness. It comes from my disbelief. It comes from me thinking that I've got it all figured out. Ultimately, what we do is we end up replacing God with ourselves, our wants, our desires, the desires of the flesh, whatever it is. For me, growing up in church, like we said in episode 1, or the first part of this, I think a lot of what I did growing up was hearing everybody else's story of their relationship with God, and then I took elements from that and created it to be my own story. Now, my own story being a culmination of everybody else's experiences, I was robbing myself of a personal experience. So that's the cool thing about God, too. We've learned that it's a personal relationship. We can believe in the exact same God, but our relationship with God is going to be completely different from one another. That's awesome. It's encouraging. It's also terrifying. But we're going to get into the third part. We're going to continue to be pulling from the big book. Again, if you've watched these last 2 episodes, this is what we would do in rehab. This is what you're going to do in meetings. This is how you're going to be able to share the message with somebody, is to come out of that big book. The cool thing about this for me is that I didn't prepare for any of this. It's literally doing it as if I would do it in front of a bunch of guys at rehab or people that are struggling in that regard. I ask God for the strength to be able to use me in whatever capacity he wants. I ask for the strength to be able to just to say yes. And that's terrifying because I'm a notes guy. I want to be prepared. I want to have it all written down. But this is one of those situations where I'm going for it, and I'm allowing this to be a God-inspired moment, as it should be every single time. But what I'm saying is I've tried to restrain myself and learn to just give in and say, okay, God, I don't know what I'm talking about. All I could do is share the experiences. Use me how you want to use me. And please give me the strength to be able to get through that, because I can't do it on my own, right? So I had a lot of feedback from the last couple of episodes, which is great. I had some awesome people reaching out to me, one of which is a dear friend of mine named Miss Pricilla, and she is from the town that I went through rehab in, and then I ended up staying there and became a part of that community. It's an incredible spot. Again, it's one of those moments in my lifetime where if you have a hard time believing in God, just go experience that community, that town, and how it embraces the addicts and alcoholics coming out of the Recovered and Free program that I was a part of. Anyways, Miss Pricilla reached out, and I'm just going to read this verbatim, the way that she said it, because the way that she said it, I think, hit the nail on the head. She said, "Hi, I wanted to send you a thought I had during the first podcast on the Higher Power. You mentioned something about Christians being viewed as being weak, but following Jesus requires great strength of character, strength of morals, strength of faith." And then she said Romans 5:1-5, which I'll read that real quick, and it's pretty spot on what she's saying. Romans 5, 1 through 5 says, "Therefore, since we have been justified by faith, we have peace with God through our Lord Jesus Christ. Through him, we have also obtained access by faith into this grace in which we stand, and we rejoice in hope of the glory of God. Not only that, but we rejoice in our sufferings, knowing that suffering produces endurance, and endurance produces character, and character produces hope, and hope does not put us to shame, because God's love has been poured into our hearts through the Holy Spirit who has been given to us." So she continues to say, which requires the greater strength, lashing out at someone who has hurt or offended you, or quietly and peacefully resolving the problem, speaking the truth in love. As society knows, we act the way we've been raised through parenting or lack thereof, media, and now technology. How are people to learn that there's a better way to live if Christians don't set the example and proclaim it? I think she hit the nail on the head. I did say that Christians are often viewed as being weak. And I do think that, at least from my personal experience with communications that I've had with atheists, with people who are struggling to understand or conceptualize God as the higher power. A lot of times people see Christians as having a faith in God as just a crutch to be able to get through your daily life. However, it is not always the easiest way in the world to give your life over to God. It's a constant struggle. God knew this was going to be the case too, to take up your cross and to follow him daily, because we're constantly struggling against the desires of the flesh. We're constantly struggling with wanting to be our own gods. That's one of the biggest lies that we were told. One of the first lies that we were told. If you look at Adam and Eve and how they had an interaction with the serpent, which is the devil, and the devil basically telling them, well, why can you not eat this fruit that God told you not to eat? And because it was going to be knowledge, right? It was going to be understanding and knowing everything that God understands and knows. And God said no. But then the serpent says, well, what kind of God would keep that kind of knowledge from you? So right there at the beginning, you see one of the first struggles, one of the first sins, one of the first, and I think one of the easiest sins to fall into is making ourselves our own gods. We're constantly in this desire for power, for learning more, for knowing more. We have to figure it all out. We talked about this in episode 1 as well, where we live in a world where science can prove almost everything. And if science can't prove it, then it must not be real, right? So therefore, that not real aspect is the faith, right? You're looking to have faith that something does exist, can exist, will exist. But if we have this mentality that we are going to be controllers of our own destiny, we are going to be our own gods, well, what's the point of God, right? We don't need God. That's a constant struggle. So, Miss Pricilla, thank you so much for that. Thank you for bringing that to everybody's attention. I think she hit the nail on the head. Romans 1 through 5. And then I have another friend of mine. His name is Austin, and he is the son of the camp director that I served at for a couple of summers. Man, it's so cool to see. I mean, he was a young kid when I was counseling at this camp. And now he's a man. He's growing up. He's doing his thing. And to see him continuing to serve the Lord is, I don't know, man. Like, I got teared up when I first saw it. But I'll put the link. I asked him for his permission, and I'll put the link to his Instagram video, his reel that he put up. But he talks about being at peace and unrest. And if you're in this state of chaos, that's not God. Right? Because God is not hard, sharp, or pressing. God is peace. He's a God of peace. He's a God of love. And oftentimes we learn in seasons of chaos. We learn in seasons of discomfort and being in a weird spot. And I think that's definitely part of growth. I think God allows us to go through that for sure. But I think what Austin was trying to get to is, if you're in the midst of chaos, if everything in your mind seems to be just bundled up, you can't breathe, you can't think, you can't function, everything is misery, then you're not tracking with God. And chances are you're not tracking with God because you are giving in to your selfish desires. You're doing something. There's something that you're not willing to let go of and lay at God's feet and say, God, take this from me. Tell me what you want me to do. In the 12-step programs, The fourth step is where you do your inventory. You go through and look at all of the areas where you've wronged someone else or someone else has wronged you, and you create this huge list of how, my dad was a piece of shit, my mom was a manipulator, this person hurt me, this girl broke up with me, and you get in this mindset of like trying to blame everybody else. But then there's a part of it where it's like, what was your part in it? And you start to realize that almost every point in your life, minus trauma, because trauma, we don't do anything to bring that trauma onto ourselves, right? Like that was just unjustly brought to us. But you start to realize I had a part to play in every single aspect. And so then you go to the fifth step. And the fifth step is where you're revealing that inventory. You're saying it in front of God, in front of a trusted companion, a friend. You're saying it typically in front of your sponsor, someone who's going to be able to hold you accountable for that. And it is it's tough. It really is, because you start to see your role in it. But Austin goes on and talks about this in a very, very incredible way. Again, I'll put in the description, I'll have a link to his reel on that. But he's talking about Matthew 11. I believe it was 28 through 30. Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me. For I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. God tells us right there that the burden is going to be light. The yoke is easy. Now, I don't think that being a Christian is just easy. I think what that means, especially what we've talked about already, is the fact that there is serenity when you're following God. I have things every single day. I've told you all about what's going on with my family. You're constantly dealing with other people's personalities. I'm a married man, so my wife and I, we have disagreements. There are difficult parts to being a husband. And on top of that, I've got a kid on the way. I'm stressed out of my mind. I'm a student. I'm not working full time, so I'm not making a ton of money. And so there are a lot of stressors. There are a lot of points where I could sit here and just throw my hands up and say, oh my God, this is the end of the world. Like, what am I going to do? I'm not going to be able to make it. And then on top of that, I'm a recovered alcoholic. And I can't tell y'all the amount of times it comes up where when I'm stressed out, like I could tell I'm getting to that spot where I'm like, God, I just need a drink. I joke about it. I kid about it because we're going on 4 years of sobriety here, but that's a reality for me. When things get so tough, sometimes I get into this mindset where I want to quit. I want to stop. I'm not good enough. I'm not worthy. I'm not good enough to be my wife's husband. I'm not good enough to be my son's father. I'm not good enough to have this roof over my head. I'm not worthy of having the food on the table. I'm not, and it just gets into this, you slip quickly into like a place of suicidal thinking. And that's a constant battle for addicts and alcoholics, especially. But when you're tracking with God, if in those moments, instead of internalizing it and trying to figure it out on my own, I'm going to God and I'm saying, God, I can't handle this. I can't handle this. This yoke is too heavy. I'm laying this at your feet. Do with me what you will. Tell me who you want me to be. Tell me what you want me to do. Give me the strength to be able to do it. Well, then if you're in that mindset of just this constant prayer, as Paul talks about in Romans, if you're in this reality that God is my authority and I'm turning my will and my life over to the care of him, not the micromanaging, not the control, but the care of God. God has my best interest in mind all the time. That's what he wants. And we talked about this too in the last episode. I don't know what I need. I don't know what I need. I can tell you some things that I think I need, but God knows what I need. And if I'm following with him, if I'm laying at his feet, I'm saying, God, I can't handle this on my own. I'm not strong enough to be my own God. I can't handle it. And I'm tracking with God. I'm listening to him. I'm taking that intuition that I'm getting, and I'm saying, God, okay, I like the Holy Spirit. You have allowed me access to the Holy Spirit. You have built me perfectly the way that you want to build me. Tell me what you want me to do. And if I have this mindset where the answer is just always going to be yes, well, there's this level of serenity that I have where I'm knowing no matter what happens, if my family falls apart, if something awful happens, if our house catches fire, whatever, everything's going to still be okay. And that's where a lot of atheists will tell Christians, well, you're just weak. You're like a little sheep. You're just doing this because, you don't know how to handle stress. No, I'm doing this because I have faith and I believe that my God is more powerful than anything else. I like to think of it as like sitting in a parking lot all right, and you have one of those little air fresheners hanging from your rear view mirror, and then maybe 2 rows over in front of you, right, you've got this massive F-250 with, the 33s on it and a 6-inch lift and this big massive truck. But that air freshener, from your perspective, sitting in your driver's seat, looking past that air freshener and seeing that truck, that air freshener is going to be bigger than what that truck is, right? That air freshener is going to look like it's double the size of that massive truck. And we do this often in life where our problems are so close to our face. We keep them right here. We keep all of our stress and our doubt and our worry and our concern right here. And we're not putting God there instead. So obviously our problems are going to be bigger than what God is. That's not true, but we do that, right? The reality is that if I'm drawing close to God and God is right here all the time, I'm praying, I'm reading scripture, I'm constantly turning my will and my life over to the care of God. I'm constantly just getting rid of those desires of the flesh. And when I have those, I'm saying, God, I don't want it. Here, take it. If God's right here, everything else looks smaller than God, right? And so this is just a constant thing to stay in the mindset of. It's like, my God is bigger than anything and everything that I will ever experience. And if you look at the story of Jesus, while Jesus was in that garden, he felt the weight of everything. He felt the weight of every sin. He felt the weight of everything bad that would ever happen. Jesus experienced every human emotion at the most extreme that it could ever be experienced in an instant. And he did that for us. Because how can you say that Jesus died for me if he didn't ever experience what I experience, right? He did. He experienced it worse than I'll ever experience it. But the problems are right here, and God is back behind those problems. So the problems always seem bigger. But if God's right here in front of me, all the problems are smaller. So hopefully we can gain this shift in perspective. So let's get into this reading real quick. Let's power through. Let's finish this up. We're on page 53. When we become alcoholics, crushed by a self-imposed crisis, we cannot postpone or evade. We had to fearlessly face the proposition that either God is everything or else he is nothing. God either is or he isn't. What was our choice to be? This is the all or nothing. This is the gas, man. This is the thing that gets me going. God is everything or he is nothing. I even wrote it in the book. God is everything or he is nothing. Arrived at this point, we were squarely confronted with the question of faith. We couldn't duck the issue. Some of us had already walked far over the bridge of reason toward the desired shore of faith. The outlines and the promise of the new land had brought luster to our eyes, to tired eyes, and fresh courage to flagging spirits. Friendly hands had stretched out in welcome. We were grateful that reason had brought us so far, but somehow we couldn't quite step ashore. Perhaps we had been leaning too heavily on reason at the last mile, and we did not like to lose our support. We hang on to this reality. We're gonna hang on to it. I got reason. I know how to handle this. I know how to resolve this. I'm super stressed. I'm gonna go to alcohol. I'm super stressed. I'm gonna play video games. I'm super stressed. I'm gonna avoid. And somehow or another, we have this peculiar mental twist where we think that that's gonna fix it, and it's not. And we hang on to that reason so long that we get burnt out. We can't just make that last little mile because we're so tired of gripping and clenching our fists. It's just wild how human beings are wired to be able to do that. That was natural, but let us think a little more closely. Without knowing it, we had not been brought to where we stood by a certain. I'm having trouble. Had we not been brought to where we stood by a certain kind of faith? For did we not believe in our own reasoning? Did we not have confidence in our ability to think? What was that but a sort of faith? Yes, we had been faithful, objectively faithful to the God of reason. So in one way or another, we discovered that faith had been involved all the time. I think this is a cool thing about how God works, right? God created us. He is in us. You want proof of God? Look inward. That's where God is at. God is here all the time. He created us as human beings. That's one of my favorite things about when I hear people like Sam Harris and these other guys that are constantly pronouncing that God is not real. These really educated, well-spoken, atheists who are constantly trying to disprove God, right? They're doing more work for the kingdom than most Christians do because they're constantly talking about God. They're trying to hang on to reason. They have faith that their reason is correct. And that's what this is talking about. Even with your blind faith, even with thinking that you've got it all figured out, that's a level of faith, is it not? And so we have this reality, like if unicorns don't exist, Okay. And if they do exist, I've never seen them. I don't spend my entire life trying to disprove the existence of unicorns. But atheists will spend their lives trying to disprove the existence of God. If something doesn't exist and it's not real, why do you have to disprove it? God's using them, and that's what God does. God wins all the time. Just by the way, get on the winning team. We found too that we had been worshipers. What a state of mental goose flesh that had been that used to bring. Oh my gosh, what a state of mental goose flesh that used to bring on. Had we not variously worshipped people, sentiment, things, money, and ourselves, and then with a better motive, we had not worshipfully beheld the sunset, the sea, the flower. Who of us had not loved something or somebody? How much did these feelings, these loves, these worships have to do with pure reason? Little or nothing, we saw at last. Were not these things the tissue out of which our lives were constructed? Did not these feelings, after all, determine the course of our existence? It was impossible to say that we had no capacity for faith or love or worship. In one form or another, we had been living by faith and little else. Imagine life without faith. Were nothing left but pure reason, it wouldn't be life. But we believed in life. Of course we did. We could not prove life in the sense that you can prove straight line is the shortest distance between 2 points, yet there it is. Could we still say the whole thing was nothing but a mass of electrons created out of nothing, meaning nothing, whirling on to a destiny of nothingness? Of course we couldn't. The electrons themselves seemed more intelligent than that, at least so the chemists said. Hence, we saw that reason isn't everything. Neither is reason, as most of us use it, entirely dependable, though it emanates from the best minds. What about people who proved that man could never fly? Yet we had been seeing another kind of flight, spiritual liberation from this world, people who rose above their problems. They said God made these things possible, and we only smiled. We had seen spiritual release, but liked to tell ourselves it wasn't true. Actually, we were fooling ourselves, for deep down in every man, woman, and child is the fundamental idea of God. It may be obscured by calamity, by pomp, by worship of other things, but in some form or the other it is there. For faith in a power greater than ourselves and miraculous demonstrations of that power in human lives are facts as old as man himself. That's huge. Since the beginning of human existence, we have always had this pull, this tug, this idea that there is something bigger than us. Correct? Look at all of the gods that were created by ancient societies. That was a way of trying to explain something that they were feeling. That doesn't just pop up out of nowhere. There's something that is innately created inside of us. We have this where we want to believe in something bigger than us. And then we get disappointed. We see pain in the world. We get hurt ourselves. And then we start to sit here and think, well, if something bigger than me did exist, then none of this would happen. Are you looking for a genie in a bottle? Are you looking for something that just serves you? Are you looking for something to be able to serve, to have a better life, to have a better existence, something that cares for you, right? My dog has an understanding that I am more powerful than he is. He has an understanding that at any point in time, I could break him if I wanted to. But he believes in the fact that I'm going to care for him. He knows this because even though at the beginning he's hesitant, and if I raise my voice to try and help train him or whatever it may be, he gets a little worried. But he knows that I'm there to love him. I'm there to protect him. I'm there to give him food and shelter and do whatever it takes because I care for him. I don't train him because I'm trying to control him necessarily. I train him because I care enough about him or I don't want him to get hurt. So now he knows his boundaries. He knows his parameters, right? But there's this constant understanding that I'm bigger than him, right? And he's going to continue to live a life where he wants to be around me because he knows that that's going to give him a better life. We finally saw that faith in some kind of God was a part of our makeup, just as much as the feeling we had for a friend. Sometimes we had to search fearlessly, but he was there. He was as much a fact as we were. We found that the great reality deep down within us. We found the great reality deep down within us. In the last analysis, it is only there that he may be found. It was so with us. We look for God to give us a sign that he's real, but we ignore all of the miracles. It's us. He's in us. He gave us that gift. That's what I told you, I think on the episode, the first part of this. I think heaven and hell, maybe they are physical locations, but I also think that's within too. If you pull away from God, if you start doing things that are slimy, that you know are wrong, if you're hurting other people, you start to feel like an awful human being. We have this consciousness, this God consciousness, naturally ingrained within us. And this hell that you can create within yourself is pulling apart from what heaven could be, which is walking with God. We can only clear the ground a bit. If our testimony helps sweep away prejudice, enables you to think honestly, encourages you to search diligently within yourself, then, if you wish, you can join us on the broad highway. With this attitude, you cannot fail. The consciousness of your belief is sure to come to you. If this book will read the experience of a man who thought he was an atheist, or in this book, you will read the experience of a man who thought he was an atheist. His story is so interesting that some of it should be told now. His change of heart was dramatic, convincing, and moving. Our friend was a minister's son. He attended church school, where he became rebellious at what he thought an overdose of religious education. For years thereafter, he was dogged by trouble and frustration, business failure, insanity, fatal illness, suicide. These calamities in his immediate family embittered and depressed him. Post-war delusionment, ever more serious alcoholism, impending mental and physical collapse brought him to the point of self-destruction. One night, when confined in a hospital, he was approached by an alcoholic who had known a spiritual experience. Our friend's gorge rose as he bitterly cried out, "If there is a God, he certainly hasn't done anything for me." But later, alone in his room, he asked himself this question: is it possible that all the religious people I have known are wrong? While pondering the answer, he felt as though he lived in hell. Then, like a thunderbolt, a great thought came. It crowded out all else. Who are you to say there is no God? This man recounts that he tumbled out of bed to his knees. In a few seconds, he was overwhelmed by a conviction of the presence of God. It poured over and through him with the certainty and majesty of a great tide at flood. The barriers he had built through the years were swept away. He stood in the presence of infinite power and love. He had stepped from the bridge to shore. For the first time, he lived in conscious companionship with his Creator. Constant companionship with his Creator. Thus was our friend's cornerstone fixed in place. And that cornerstone, like we talked about in the last episode, is just the faith. Just the faith of thinking there is something else out there bigger than me. I'm going to accept the fact that there is a God and I'm not it. That's your cornerstone, your faith, your belief. No later vicissitude has shaken it. His alcoholic problem was taken away. That very night, years ago, it disappeared. Save for a few brief moments of temptation, the thought of drink has never returned. And at such times, a great revulsion has risen up in him. Seemingly, he could not drink even if he would. God had restored his sanity. What is this but a miracle of healing? Yet its elements are simple. Circumstances made him willing to believe. He humbly offered himself to his Maker. Then he knew. Even so has God restored us all to our right minds. To this man, the revelation was sudden. Some of us grow into it more slowly, but he has come to all who have honestly sought him. When we drew near to him, he disclosed himself to us. This is going back to talking about seek and you will find. Okay? If you genuinely seek God, if you want nothing more than to draw close to God, he's going to give you that presence. He's there. He's waiting. And I don't want to sit here and try and sound like I'm trying to start some, revival. I'm sitting in a tent and I'm screaming at you. I'm telling you from genuine experience. I didn't have a lightning bolt moment like that. And if you look at the story in the big book, Bill W. goes through the 12 steps in a matter of a night. This is a lot. I went through it in 3 months. But there is a turning point, and I can tell you 100% that does exist. I can tell you that for someone who was a hopeless drunk like myself, who's someone who was willing to hit women and hurt people and tear things down and just breathing sulfur from my lungs, wanting to end my life, wanting to hurt other people, having zero desire to exist in this planet anymore. I can tell you that when you do genuinely get to that spot where you say, God, I can't do it anymore. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to do it. I don't even know if you're real, but God, I'm asking you, please just come into my heart, change me. And I know for a fact that does work. Seek and you will find. The journey does not have to be a certain way. The journey does not have to be the same for every single person, and it's not. People come to God in so many different ways. God comes to people in so many different ways. But I do know that we were created in his image. I don't necessarily know what that means directly. I can't give you an exact definition, but I know that there are elements of God that when he created us, he wanted to give us. And I genuinely think, that's why I say all the time, I don't think that there are bad people, just bad choices. I think that there's redemption for everybody. If God can take those 12 messed up, screwed up, twisted off disciples and turn them into the men that he allowed them to be, why do you think that you're the one special idiot that can't be saved? We don't understand it. I struggle a lot with this when people wrong me, where I know that I'm recovered and I know that I'm tracking with God and I know that I've had a complete lifestyle change, a complete perspective change. And then when people make me mad, there's this dark place that I'll switch to and I'm just like, maybe I'm not fully recovered yet. Buckle up, let's go. But that's not it, right? That's not me. And that's not who God would want me to be. And I know it's tough. It's a constant struggle. It's, again, as Miss Pricilla so beautifully alluded to, it's not always easy being a Christian. Quite the opposite. It tends to be more difficult sometimes. But then, as Austin said, God's yoke is light. The burden is easy. And all you have to do is just draw close. If I'm stressed out and I'm struggling and I'm needing a dopamine boost and I tell myself, I want to look at porn, do I just give in to that? Or do I say, God, I don't want to have these thoughts. Like, take this from me. If I'm stressed out and I'm tired and I'm isolated and I'm hating myself and I want to just drink to drown out my problems, do I just go for it? Is that just what I'm supposed to do? Or is the more difficult yet more rewarding thing to do is, God, I'm not thinking clearly. I want to draw close to you so I don't have to deal with this. I don't want to do it. And Austin says this too in his reel, where it's not like God's the genie in the bottle. God wants you to experience certain things. He gives you things to experience to strengthen who you are, to strengthen your character, to strengthen your resolve. But if I'm just expecting God to take everything away all the time, that's the same thing as a parent enabling me. Every time that I cuss someone out, or if I'm a high school kid and I get in a fight and my parents come to my rescue every time and say, oh, my boy would never do anything wrong. And then when we're one-on-one, they're like, it's okay. It was their fault. What does that teach you? How do you grow? How do you learn? How do you get better if someone's doing something for you every time? If when you fall, someone doesn't let you stand up on your own, they just pick you up and then they put you exactly where you need to be. What did you learn from that? That you can just screw up and you don't ever have to suffer the consequences? No, the consequences mold us. I'm 35 years old. I'm about to have my first kid. I'm still trying to finish my bachelor's degree, right? And I've learned so much from screwing up. I exist right now as a bundle of miscues and mistakes and failed experiences. But where I didn't fail is taking those experiences and saying, okay, I'm gonna know that now for next time, and I'm gonna be better moving forward. And I have been. And that's the only reason I'm on my own 2 feet right now. That's the only reason I'm not dead. Is because I was able to get to a spot where I had enough people point me in the direction of a God who is endlessly merciful. And despite my mistakes, he's still saying, I love you. I don't think any less of you, but you got to get up and do this now. And then I got to a point where I just said, okay, the answer is just always yes. There is a God, and I'm not it. God is not hard, sharp, or pressing. God does not want to torture you. He's not a puppet master sitting there and letting you dance around all the nonsense that he's going to put in your life to make you hurt. That's not the way God operates. God is peaceful. God is loving. And I really hope that somehow or another, whatever message we're putting out, you can find him. If you have a hard time finding him, I've got plenty of people that can help you. I'll be glad to have a conversation. I'm never closed off to other people who are wanting to talk about God, who are wanting to find a way, a better way than thinking that they can do it all on their own. I love you guys so much. Again, keep on keeping on. Keep on giving me feedback. Ask questions. We'll address it here. And then eventually maybe we'll do a live panel kind of thing. I don't know. You guys are great. Love you so much. We're going to be moving on from higher power to a different topic in the next episode. But if you wouldn't mind, if you've listened this far, anytime that you like or subscribe or comment, anything like that helps me out. downloading episodes, whatever it is, whatever you feel like you need to do. You don't have to do that at all. You can listen to this content for free, and we're going to try and keep it that way. So love you guys. Keep your head up. Keep your heart open. Go help somebody. Y'all are rock stars. Bye.